Hi, I'm Lady Saelym.
And I'm Madam Omen.
Join us as we dive deeper into Galveston's history. Pirates and storms, true crime and tragedy.
And the lore and legends that were born from it.
We're not here to tell ghost stories. We're here to uncover where they started.
And what never fully let go. And who stayed behind.
Beyond the past, because history doesn't rest, and neither should you.
Tonight's episode contains adult themes. The characters in our story are fictional, but the experiences they reflect are drawn from documented history of Galveston's red light district. Listener discretion is advised.
In our last episode, we explored the Free State of Galveston, the years when gambling, bootlegging, and organized vice openly thrived on the island, all the way through the shutdown of the Maceo Empire in 1957.
But long before the casinos, the nightclubs, and the famous Balinese Room, Galveston already had a reputation. Hi, I'm Lady Saelym.
And I'm Madam Omen. Tonight we're stepping further back in time, into the late 1800s, to a stretch of Post Office Street locals once called the Line.
And we'll start the way many women did back then, with a knock at a side door. The advertisement promised steady wages and a room. She kept the paper folded inside her glove from the moment she stepped off the train at the depot, pressing it flat whenever her fingers began to tremble. It is nearly dusk when she reaches Post Office Street. The evening air hangs thick with Gulf humidity. Salt and coals drift together in the breeze, and somewhere behind, a cart rattles past, iron rims tapping against the brick street. Gas lamps along the walk are just beginning to glow. A mosquito whines near her. She brushes it away without even thinking. The address leads her to a narrow building with curtains drawn tight against the windows. Music slips faintly through the walls. She hesitates. Then she knocks.
The door that opens is not the front entrance. It's a narrow side door. A woman studies her quickly, suitcase, gloves, posture, measuring more than just the luggage in her hand. Then she steps aside.
You'll come in through here.
Inside, the air is warm. Perfume lingers lightly over tobacco smoke. And somewhere deeper in the house, a piano plays with patient confidence, as if it has been playing the same tune every evening for years.
She's led through a short corridor into a parlor humming with quiet intention. Men sit along the walls at small polished tables, coats folded neatly beside them, voices low and controlled. Women sit among them, composed. One leans in to hear a whisper, another rests her hand lightly against a gentleman's sleeve, as if the gesture has been practiced 100 times before. At the center of the room stands a woman, older than the rest. She says very little, but the room, it seems to move with her. When she turns her head, conversations soften, and people, they wait for her attention.
You are here for the position?
The girl nods. A man near the piano rises. He speaks to the woman first. Coins pass quietly between them. Only then does he turn toward one of the seated women. She stands. They move toward the staircase together, and the piano never stops.
The older woman gestures for the girl to follow. She does. Upstairs, the hallway is dim. Lamps burn low. Doors remain closed. At the far end, a room is open. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single gas lamp casting light across the warm floorboards.
This is your chamber. You will be paid in cash daily.
Her gaze lingers a moment longer.
Keep it hidden.
Alone now, the girl leans back against the door as it closes. Below her, the piano continues. Footsteps on the stairs, a knock, a door opening, a door closing. The pattern repeats. No one has explained the position. They don't have to. She pauses. The street is still outside. She could leave, but the train ticket has already been spent and she had nowhere left to go. She closes the door and lets the music continue beneath her feet.
By the late 1880s,
prostitution in Galveston had been largely confined to several blocks surrounding Post Office Street and 25th, an area locals commonly referred to as the Line. It was never legalized, it was tolerated, under containment. Municipal records show recurring fines and disorderly conduct charges tied to addresses along this stretch. The objective wasn't morality, it was order. Galveston at the time was one of the busiest ports in the Gulf. Ships arrived carrying cotton, cargo, sailors, merchants passing through the city for only a short time. In port cities like this, districts such as the Line often developed a way to contain vice within a known boundary rather than pretend that it didn't exist. Many sporting houses also kept a pianist on the parlor throughout the evening. The music was more than decoration. It softened the sounds of the house and helped maintain a steady rhythm in the room below. If the piano stopped suddenly, people noticed.
Later, when the lamps burn lower and the parlor thins, Maggie Doyle sits beside Nora without asking permission. Maggie is older by several years. Her posture relaxed in a way that comes from knowing the rules.
You don't have to decide tonight.
Nora keeps her eyes on the piano keys. She watches the players' hands move like they've done it 1,000 times.
How long did it take you?
Long enough to understand. I'd already decided the moment I walked through the door.
Nora thinks of the mill floor, the heat. She thinks of the rent that didn't pause just because the wages did. Downstairs, coins exchange hands again. The system continues.
Do they all know
Do they know what?
that we don't belong here?
Maggie's mouth almost curves in a smile.
Belonging has nothing to do with it.
The piano shifts keys. Footsteps climb the stairs. A door opens. A door closes. Nora doesn't flinch this time, but the weight remains. And it settles. And in that settling, survival begins to feel less like a surrender and more like a decision.
In districts like Galveston's Line, businesses depend on order. Encounters were structured, payments were handled in advance, and time was carefully measured. Routine protected profit, and houses that lasted understood something important. Keeping the work quiet kept the authorities quiet. Disorder was bad for business.
3 nights later, the madam's eyes rest on Nora with quiet certainty.
You're ready.
A man rises from a table near the wall. His movements are careful, almost practiced. He speaks to the madam first, his voice low enough that Nora cannot hear the words. Coins pass across the polished surface of the desk. The madam weighs them briefly in her palm before sliding them into the drawer. Only then does the man turn towards Nora. He offers his arm. She stands.
The staircase feels familiar now, though her stomach still tightens as she climbs. From below, the piano continues its steady rhythm. The same melody the house seems to favor every evening. At the door, Nora reaches for the handle first. Maggie's voice echoes quietly in her memory.
Always open the door first.
Inside, The lamp casts the same soft circle of light across the bed and the washstand. The man removes his coat with deliberate care and folds it over the chair as though small gestures still matter in a place like this. He speaks politely. Nora answers politely. For a moment, the room almost feels ordinary.
Outside the door, the house continues its quiet routine. Footsteps along the hallway, a laugh drifting up from the parlor below. The piano shifting keys. Inside the room, Nora moves carefully through the motions Maggie had explained only hours earlier. Careful to follow the rules, because the rules are what keeps everybody safe. A short while later, two firm knocks against the door. Nora understands what they mean now. House time has finished.
The man straightens his cuffs before he leaves. He offers a brief nod, the kind that belongs to polite company rather than the room that they've just shared. Then he steps into the hallway and disappears down the staircase. Nora remains where she is for a moment, listening. Below her, the piano never stopped playing. The house did not pause. It never does.
And when Nora reaches the bottom of the stairs, Maggie's leaning against the wall near the landing, as though she had been there the whole time. She studies Nora's face for only a moment in a way that kind of felt like protection.
Records from vice districts in the late 19th century show that periodic health inspections were common. These measures were not moral campaigns, they were economic safeguards. Illness threatened business, and pregnancy could disrupt it. In contained districts like Galveston's line, visibility required management of the houses, of behavior, and sometimes of the women themselves. Control, in other words, was part of the system.
The weeks pass. The house settles into its patterns. Nora learns the rhythm of the stairs, the way the piano drifts up through the floorboards, the quiet signals that move through the hallway when the night is about to begin. But one afternoon, the front door opens earlier than usual. A man steps inside carrying a leather book. Whispers move through the house. Inspection. The news travels quickly, door to door.
By the time the man reaches the second floor, the hallway already looks different. Beds are freshly made, wash basins are filled, windows cracked open just enough for the damp Gulf air to move through the rooms. The madam walks ahead of him, calm as always. He stops at the first door and opens his ledger.
How many women in residence?
7.
Any illnesses reported?
None this week.
He writes the date beside the number.
At the next door, he pauses.
Name?
Harold Wilson.
The woman answers from the chair beside her washstand. He studies her only briefly before marking something in his book.
Any favored?
No.
Missed work?
No.
He nods once, the pencil scratches again, then he moves on down the hallway.
When he reaches Nora's room, he doesn't linger. He asks the same questions. Nora answers carefully. The man glances around the room once, as if measuring the order of it.
Very good.
Then he closes the ledger.
A few minutes later, the footsteps fade down the staircase. Below, the piano begins again. Chairs slide back into place. And the house resumes its evening, as if the interruption had only been another part of the routine.
The language of the period is often softened by what it described. Brothels were commonly called sporting houses. City and court records followed the same habit. Rather than naming the trade directly, officials relied on charges such as disorderly conduct. It was a vocabulary that allowed the industry to be regulated without ever quite saying what it was. The phrase red light district spread later through American newspapers. One popular explanation traces it to railroad workers who hung red signal lanterns outside the houses they visited. Whether literal or folklore, the name endured. By the time it did, Galveston's line was already well established.
The parlor was busy that night. The piano plays something quick and cheerful, the kind of tune that makes conversation sound lighter than it really is. Men sit along the walls in a loose row of chairs, coats folded neatly over their knees. Ever so often, one of them rises, crosses the room, and speaks quietly with the madam. Coins exchange hands. A door upstairs opens. A door upstairs closes. Then the next man stands. Nora watches this pattern for a while before leaning towards Maggie.
They've been sitting here all evening.
Maggie glances across the room.
Of course they have.
She nods towards the row of chairs.
That's the line.
Districts like Galveston's line depend on control from within. Larger sporting houses relied on structure, house rules, careful timing, staff watching the rooms and stairways to keep the peace and keep business moving. The system worked best when nothing spilled into the streets. If it did, that's when the authorities appeared and the records began.
After a few weeks, Nora begins to notice things that she missed at first. A porter at the base of the stairs never seems to leave his post for long. When voices grow sharper at a table, a maid appears almost immediately with a tray of water and glasses. It's a gentle interruption, but it changes the moment. Across the room, the madam sits behind her desk with her ledger open, her chair angled just enough to see the parlor and the staircase at the same time. Nothing in the room escapes her for long.
Later that night, a chair scrapes too hard against the floor. A man's voice rises. Not shouting, but close enough. Before Nora can even fully turn around toward the sound, the porter is already there. A hand on the man's shoulder, the madam watching from her desk. The moment dissolves almost as quickly as it began. The man sits again. The piano never stops playing.
Historical records from vice districts including Galveston occasionally note disturbances, an assault, a charge of disorderly conduct, a fine. These entries stand out precisely because they were unusual. Most nights left little trace at all. Routine rarely made the newspapers or the court docket. It only appeared in the record when something broke the pattern.
It happens on an evening that begins like any other. The parlor is full but calm. The piano drifts through a light melody. Cigarettes burn in a silver tray. Coins pass quietly across the madam's desk. Nothing in the room feels hurried, but then the side door opens. The man who enters is already out of rhythm with the house. He doesn't take a seat along the wall. He doesn't look at the piano. He studies the room instead, not like a guest, but more like a buyer deciding which crate to open first. Nora notices him immediately.
The madam speaks to him briefly. A few words, a small exchange of coins. He gestures towards a red-haired woman seated near the wall. The woman stands. Her movements remain smooth, practiced, but her eyes flicked once towards Maggie. A quick look, the kind that women learn to read without an explanation. They move toward the staircase together.
And the piano continues. The man in the parlor laughs at something someone says. A chair scrapes lightly across the floor. The house keeps moving. Minutes pass. Then, a sharp sound from upstairs. Not loud, but wrong. The music falters for a half a beat before the pianist steadies the rhythm again.
2 knocks strike the door upstairs. Not the gentle kind of knock either. Harder. The madam is already on her feet. The porter moves toward the staircase without being told. Maggie follows. Nora finds herself rising too, her feet carrying her halfway up the stairs before she realizes what's going on. The hallway above is tight with quiet voices. And then the door opens.
The man comes out first, his jaws tight. His coat hangs over his arm as though he forgot how to wear it. He walks past the madam without speaking, down the stairs and out the side door. The house just lets him go.
Inside the room, the red-haired woman sits on the edge of the bed. Her sleeve is torn. A thin line of blood darkens her lip, but she is upright, breathing. The madam stands near the door, watching. Maggie steps forward and presses a cloth gently against the woman's mouth. No one raises their voice. No one says the man's name.
A moment later, the piano downstairs resumes its earlier tune. Chairs shift, glasses clink. The house resumes its evening.
By the early 1890s, Galveston was a city on the rise. Ships crowded the harbor. Rail lines carried cotton and travelers inland. Along the Strand, new buildings climbed higher each year as the port expanded and fortunes moved through the island. Within that growing city, districts like the Line continued to operate under the quiet balance of containment and occasional enforcement. For the moment, the system held, but Galveston's history rarely stays still for long. Larger upheavals, storms, reform movements, shifting public tolerance were all still ahead.
After that night, the house looks the same. The routine continues as if nothing ever interrupted it. But Nora, well, she listens differently now. Every sound carries weight. A door closing upstairs, footsteps in the hallway, a quiet pause before someone laughs.
Maggie moves through the house with the same calm she always had. But Nora does notice small changes. Maggie checks the hallways now before she lets Nora pass. She watches the men a little longer before nodding toward a chair. Sometimes, Maggie touches Nora's elbow lightly and steers her away from a table without saying why. Other times, she only murmurs 2 words. Not him. No explanation follows. None is needed.
Nora begins to understand the rhythm more clearly, how the madam keeps the parlor in view from her desk, the porter stays close to the staircase, how the music never quite stops, even when the voices grow sharp. The house cannot stop everything, but it knows how to close ranks.
Weeks pass. The work becomes quieter inside of Nora's mind. Not easier, but familiar. She counts the coins more carefully when the madam presses them into her hand. She watches the room the way that Maggie watches it now. And some nights, when the parlor grows loud and the lamps burn low, Nora catches her reflection in the hallway mirror and she pauses. But not for too long, just enough to recognize the woman who is standing there. In the end, Nora doesn't leave. Not tonight, not this season. Leaving isn't a single decision. It's a doorway you only reach when the world beyond it offers somewhere to go. And for now, the house still has a place for her, and so she stays. The piano keeps playing. The chairs fill and empty. Coins continue to slide across the madam's desk as steadily as the tide against the harbor walls. The house breathes in, and the house breathes out. The night goes on.
So we leave her here, before the storms arrive, before reformers and headlines and shifting public tolerance begin to pull at the seams of places like this, before the island learns how quickly routine can disappear. Tonight we leave Nora on the line, the way it truly was. Curtains drawn against the street, lamps burning low behind the glass, a ledger balanced at a madam's desk, the piano steady in a parlor, a house built on routine, women built on endurance, in a city that preferred containment over confession.
Places like this rarely vanish all at once. They fade, they change names, and they become stories that are told from a safe distance. But once, they were simply part of the night.
And history remembers them, whether the city admits it or not. This has been Beyond the Past, because history doesn't rest.
And neither should you.